Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Asian American Writers Workshop. Really glad to have you all here with us tonight. My name is Muhammad Saleh. I'm the programs manager here. And a couple of housekeeping remarks before we begin. There are two gender neutral bathrooms in the back over there. One is right there. The other one is through the kitchen. Please forgive any detritus in the sink. We try to keep things clean, but sometimes we forget. Masks are required, so please keep them on for the duration of the event. And if for any reason at all we need to step away, step back, take a breather, we have a quiet space in the back that is completely open to you. You don't need to ask us, you can just go there. Sound good? Sound good. Brilliant. Thank you again for joining us. For the last 30 plus years, the Asian American Writers Workshop has been dedicated to amplifying the voices of Asian Americans, doing so from what we like to call a radically inclusive ethos. I know that sounds nebulous, but what it means in practice is expanding the definition of not only what it means to be an Asian American, but also what it means to be a writer. That takes the form of events like tonight, where we share with you some brilliant writing, some brilliant poetry, and I hope you like it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first reader of the evening. Niki Afsar is a non-binary femme Iranian-American writer and interdisciplinary artist living and working in the Washington, D.C. area. Born in Los Angeles to Tehran-born parents and learning to speak Farsi in their mid-20s, their work explores expressions of fluidity and longing within language. They are currently an artist at Red Dirt Studio in Mount Rainier, Maryland, and have performed at Rhizome DC and the Pie Shop DC. They were a 2023 Wherewithal grantee and a 2024 Emerging Artist Mentee at Transformer Gallery DC. Please put your hands together for Niki Afsar.
Thank you so much. Can people hear me fine with my mask on?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Niki. I am going to read 4 poems, 3 of which are mine. I don't know if this one needs an introduction, except that, yeah, I went to live in Tehran for a couple years to learn Farsi, and it was a very emotional and complicated experience. So, some poems came out of that, and this was one of them. Babylon. I do not know this history. I cannot tell you what this land was, who conquered and who fell here. I cannot tell you names. I know vaguely of a clay cylinder with cuneiform letters that someone tells me spoke of repatriation, acceptance, and tolerance. A spinning tablet, words spiraling on a circumference, inviting people back. I learned the name of a city, Yaz. I learned the name of a shrine in the mountains, Chek Chek. I learned the name Nik Bonut. I hear the story of how she escaped into the mountains to flee invaders. And who were the invaders? Alone, separated from her family. And who was her family? As she climbed the mountain and saw men on horses approaching. And who were the men? And were they on horses? She turned to the mountain and said, "Embrace me as a kind mother and save me." And the mountain split open and she disappeared. Can stone welcome? Can land? Can I return to a place I have never been, accepted, tolerated? Empires rise and fall, power moves in cycles, we spin on an axis. I watch the sun set when really I am spinning backwards into darkness. I am moving backwards to a place I do not recognize. The nightingale flies back to its rose. I fly back to the first language I spoke and the first I forgot. I'm doing this all out of order. I learn to read words backwards. I unlearn backwards, forwards, left, right. I search for words on a circle and let history envelop me with the veracity of stone. Thank you. This next one is called Into the Mountain. I was very lucky to have it published as part of the issue, the margins issue that was made in tribute to Sarah Higazi. I say it with my Farsi accent. I actually kind of read that first poem to sort of give a little bit of context to this poem. And the woman in the mountain said, "Bring wandering travelers here, and I will nourish them with the water of my tears. And the woman in the mountain said, this world will have you running to stone for embrace. Bald, 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 balls. How to find it again, the living. How to stay alive when the mountain has taken you. Balzam, balzam. Wake up, drink water, 1 foot and then the next, walk, meet the sun, and again and again and again until you feel something. And the woman in the mountain said, my head is full of rocks, my mouth, ears, nose full of sand. The worst part of this is all the time stolen from me. And the woman in the mountain said, the mountain took me. Alone in the desert, the mountain folded me into arms of stone like a mother. Is this intimacy, the leaning in, the point of contact, the gravitational pull between us, energy flowing between beings on the event horizon, where you tilt your body in and give yourself to nothing? Is it the mirror tilted towards the sun, flashing out light? And the woman in the mountain said, every day I remember the hands of my father's mother, the way they seem to lengthen as she grew older, fingers like curving branches extending out towards light. I remember her hands before she died, the skin stretched over them, the muscles almost gone, bony and tremulous, quivering atop the blanket she lay under. I have my mother's hands, short and delicate. There are too many things I wish I had said and done. Every day I remember I am alone. Every day I remember running out into the desert. Every day I remember giving my body to the mountain. And the woman in the mountain said, دستهایم را در باغچه می‌پرم. سبز خواهم شد. می‌دانم, می‌دانم, می‌دانم. And the woman in the mountain said, I am not a woman, I am mountain. My tears flow from bare stone, my body is rock and dust. I am not a woman, you will not make me need to be you, will not tell me what I am, you will not have me believe you can contain my body and my breath in such a word in what you call woman. I am not, I am not, I am flowing water. I am a garden in bloom. One day I decay and the next I am the moon. I swell and shrink. I am the tree pulling up sap up my body to nourish sprouting leaves for spring. I am the mountain and the soil and the horizon and the stars. I am all of this and more. I am more. I am more than you could ever know, more than you could ever imagine. Should I go or should I keep going? And the being in the mountain said, I am still waiting, biding my time. I must refuse to be denied. I have given myself to be swallowed and consumed and enveloped in embrace. I will survive, but I will not be fixed. I am mountain, my tears are water, my soul is migrant. I am in flight with a desert in my heart. I will bloom and grow and wilt and bloom again. I will have both, and when you see all that I am, you will fall upon your sword in ecstasy, to see a flower become a bird, a being become a mountain, towering, soaring, falling, the drop and the ocean. I will untangle the knot, tie it into the tapestry and unravel it again. I can turn into a bird at will and fly into the sun. Look, you can see the mirror that is me reflected in the mirror that is you, the mirror that is me. We are infinite. And the mountain said, and I said, and I, and I, and, 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 and. Okay, 2 more, very short ones, I promise. This one is not my writing. This is a piece by Fargo Tabaki, who is a queer poet and performance artist living in DC who very generously agreed to collaborate with me on the piece that I had showing in Transformer Gallery. The piece was, the prompt was about queer utopia and imagining a map of what queer utopia could look like. And because I work with mirrors, and because Palestine is on my mind. I made a sculptural map of Palestine out of fractured mirrors. And I asked Fargo to write the text around it. And so this was the text that he wrote. Queer utopia is a utopia against death. Queer utopia is a utopia against life premised on death. Each settler state is a life premised on death. Queer utopia is a utopia against each settler state. Citizenship is a life premised on death. Queer utopia is a utopia against all citizenship. Capitalism is a life premised on death. Queer utopia is a utopia against capitalism. This world is a world premised on death. Queer utopia is a utopia against the world. Palestine is a utopia that destroys this world. This world is an empire of brutality. Palestine is a utopia that destroys capital. Capital is a dream of endless foreclosure. Palestine is a utopia that destroys all citizenship. Citizenship is the marker of an exclusionary life. Palestine is a utopia that destroys each settler state. Each settler state crumbles under the weight of Palestine. Palestine is a utopia for life. Life walks in Palestine through walls and doors and soil. Life is made in Palestine. Palestine is made of life. And to finish, I'm just going to read the instructions that I wrote for the piece, since it is a mirror and was inviting people to see themselves in it. So I wrote a set of instructions for looking into the mirror. Shift your focus to see the shape of the mirrors. Shift your focus to see yourself. Who else do you see? Can you imagine a liberated Palestine? Can you imagine a liberated world for all of us? Will you be a part of creating a free world out of a broken one? Can you see yourself here? Will you be invited here? Only those who have given themselves to this cause will be welcomed. Will the future remember you? This land cannot just reflect you. You must also be a mirror. What will you reflect back? What are you willing to give up for a free world?
Keep it going, 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 keep it going. That's what community sounds like, friends. You have to support us. Thank you, Nikki, for that. I'm Palestinian, and thank you for making space.
Oh
for
my
us.
God, of course.
Thank you. And now on to Khashayar Khabushani. I think that it's always an opportunity that we like to take when a debut novelist comes out with a work that we want to share, that we want to read, that keeps us flipping pages over and over. And I think Khashayar has done that with his debut novel. He will be signing books in the back after the reading, so please stick around. And now for the formal bio. Khashayar Khabushani was born in Van Nuys, California in 1992. During his childhood, he spent time in Iran before returning to Los Angeles. He studied philosophy at California State University, Northridge, and prior to completing his MFA at Columbia University, he worked as a middle school teacher. This is his first novel. Please put it together.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is so sweet. I'm gonna just, as I'm reading, gonna have my mask off. I was telling Mohammed when I got here, it's so rare, I feel, to have a space where we get to come together and talk about really complicated things and share really complicated feelings, emotions. I know it's in New York City, so there are quite a few of these spaces, and this is my first time here, and it's a reminder that we just need to seek and find them. So you could be anywhere right now, and I really appreciate y'all coming out on this Thursday. People have COVID, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going. The paperback for this novel came out this past, was it July, I think? I don't know. Are we in July? We're in July. I don't know what's going on anymore. And I had the chance to read, but as we're getting further along from publication, I feel like the chance to read are going to be fewer and fewer, and working on something new and hopefully finish that. But I want to read tonight one of my favorite scenes. This is the first scene that I wrote of the novel. And I'm gonna read it in a kind of animated way. I'm not an actor. So give me some grace there. All you need to know about this scene, Bubba is the father, Justin and Sean are the two older brothers, and then it's narrated by Kay, who's the youngest brother. It takes place in Los Angeles. We drive through Malibu's canyon and into a short tunnel where Bobo punches down on the horn and glances over his shoulder at me and my brothers. A quick smile on his lips and our ritual begins, Bobo telling us to let it all out, to make as much noise as we can. But this time, instead of shouting, I lower my window, feeling the cool darkness as we reach the end of the tunnel, the final echoes bouncing off my cheeks and jaw. And that's when Justin leans over, yelling at me to roll up the window because the drumming from the wind is hurting his head. I don't listen to him. I keep going, looking up at the slivers of sunlight pouring through the tall green trees, until finally my brother reaches over, rolls up the window himself, and now my nut is stuck in between the window frame and the glass, both of us laughing as I beg for mercy. For those of you that have siblings, I'm sure you know. It's like pain leads to bonding, which needs to be worked on, but here we are. A few of us, a few miles down Pacific Coast Highway, Bobo finds our spot, parks the car right here on the shoulder of the cliff. He puts the red metal lock in place on the steering wheel and hurries around to the trunk, takes out the Coleman camping stove to fire up for chai when we're down by the water. The three of us strip off our jeans, changing into shorts. I peek over at Sean, wanting to know what it'll look like when I'm older, wondering if his has the same pink and brown as mine. Bobo is standing at the edge of the cliff. I join him and my brothers do too, all of us lined up together in a row, and for a second I close my eyes, just listening. The water crashing onto shore, the ocean's big, salty breath puffing through the wind. With my eyes closed, the waves feel closer than they really are, as if the ocean's hum lives inside of me too. Until Sean pretends to shove me off the cliff, scaring me good. Then Bubba shows us 3 quarters in his open palm. Smiling so big, he says, whoever gets there first gets these. Racing down the cliff's narrow dirt path, Justin is in the lead, though not by much. He's followed by Sean, and right behind him there's me, skipping and jumping through the thick vines and dusty rocks, my naked feet landing with theirs. When we reach the beach, Justin and me wrestle Sean to the ground, scooping handfuls of sand and forcing them between his teeth while 2 women stare and ask, don't these kids have parents? Now I'm in the lead, leaping over sandcastles and abandoned towels, arriving at the lip of the ocean. Justin follows, and together we look back, waiting for Sean. The sun throws a slide onto our chest, heating our skin, and Sean finally arrives, his eyes red from the sand. Justin counts down from 5, and I pinch my nostrils as we plunge into the waves, roaring, it's so fucking cold, Sean goes. And then Justin yells, I'm getting out. Splashing them both, I tread farther into the sea because once you go under, it isn't so bad. Floating near the shore, I watch my brothers. Justin walking along the water as Sean collapses onto the sand, his body open and free, here for the sun. And there's Bobo, stumbling down the path from the top of the cliff. He drops the cooler off with Sean, and right away my brother pulls out a cola, snapping it open, holding up the can as its dark liquid rushes into his mouth and across his chin. He waits for it to rise from his gut, a burp so long and loud that the lifeguard sitting up high at her station will notice him. This is Sean's favorite part of coming to the beach, winking at the girl of his dreams, the lifeguard shaking her blonde head, laughing. It doesn't get any better than this, Bubba roars, driving his arms into the ocean, his knees kicking up high as he stomps his feet, setting off fireworks of salty mist that spray me, the white ocean birds hovering above. He scoops up handfuls of the sharp blue water, dumping them onto himself as if the water were God's, but here for prayer. Like this, Bubba becomes clean again. This time, he shouts, turning toward me, this time we're going all the way. He wraps his arm around my shoulders as I join him, bringing my chilled skin into his. All the way out there, he tells me, pointing past the surfers drifting and waiting for the perfect wave, past the orange cone bobbing in the water and the lifeguard's red and white boat dashing across. My eyes follow him to the edge of the ocean, the shadowy blue water leaning up into puffed white clouds, long milky threads sketched across the bottom of the sky. Waves dipping and then folding into Bubba's chest, he lowers himself into the ocean. A smile splashed across his face. I keep watching as he chants it again and again. It's perfect out here, Bubba says. Perfect. He then points higher into the sky, the sun spreading its light through the clouds so bright, as he reminds me, again, how he saw it in my eyes from the very beginning, holding me in his arms after I was born, a light inside of me as strong as the sun. He helps me climb onto his back, my arms wrapped and locked across his chest. I let my legs dangle and hang as he stumbles to his feet, tightening his grip around my ankles, telling me that he's here, he's holding on. Taking 2 steps back, then shuffling his legs forward, Bubba drives his toes deep into the sand, digs in his balance, and I could feel each step crunching through his legs, snapping through his chest until they no longer do, because now we're floating. The ocean borrows our weight and carries us towards the end, the sting from the salt and the sun burning my eyes open. Bubba turns his neck, tells me to get ready. After that one gets here, he says, his eyes now focused on the wave coming toward us. Follow me underneath. But I thought you said we were going all the way, I tell him, my voice carried away by the wind. Almost, he shouts, almost. My shoulders lean back, my body no longer huddled into Bubba's, the bones in my chest stretching as I take bigger and longer bites of air, storing them inside while Bubba drinks down his final breath, escaping below. So now I rise in the ocean's lap, higher and then higher as the wave curls and drapes over, tucking me inside what's now become a hushed blue cave, where the ocean is quieter than Bubba or my brothers will ever know. Its blue skin becoming my own, the waves white vein ripping through, and I watch as the cave begins to crack and then snap, spitting me out and thrashing my body, my face slamming onto the ocean floor, and still, here underneath, with this fire in my lungs, salt churning in my stomach, with the ocean saying, I told you so, you should have never come out this far. I don't close my eyes, don't ask for it to stop. I just keep watching, waiting for it to happen again, that pretty moment where I was tucked inside of my own quiet. Noticed.
That was beautiful, friends. And now I'd like to invite Niki and Khashayar up for conversation.
Thank you. I forgot my mask.
No, sorry. That is okay. There it is.
Thank you. People feel okay about us being on mass while talking.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, it's on.
I think it's, no, it's not. Thank you. This was.
Try. Speak.
Hello.
Oh, no.
Mohammed, you're smarter than.
I'm trying. We're trying here. That's what we do. There it is.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay. I think first notes. Oh my God, are you kidding? I had to. I think first of all, I want to say thank you for writing this book. I think a number of Iranians have probably already told you thank you. A number of queer Iranians have thanked you for writing this book. I know from my personal experience, just being able to see other queer Iranians, being able to write about their experiences and shared experiences, and various experiences. It's really exciting and very brave, I think. Braver than maybe it feels. But I I think I want to start with, about queerness and writing queer fiction
I'm
and.
so glad, because I already have like 6 questions for you about what
Yeah.
you said, so I'll wait for before I interrupt. I have a bad habit or a good habit of that, of like asking people questions, so I don't have to answer
No,
any questions.
you need stuff.
Yeah,
Back and
exactly.
forth. Yeah. Did you set out to be a queer writer, or, what were the challenges that came to mind writing about yourself and about your queerness as an Iranian American?
Yeah, the coolest thing about writing fiction in this case, because I started off telling the story as nonfiction, and that's what I got my MFA in, was in nonfiction writing, and so had thought about it in the form of a memoir. And I specifically remember the day that I was working on a certain chapter where the narrator was describing something to me, or was wanting to describe something that hadn't happened in my lived life. And as someone that's working on nonfiction, hopefully as someone that's working on nonfiction, you sort of fact check yourself and say that didn't happen, or we need to stay on course. But I don't know, I guess it was like the grace of God or something, that I thought, well, let me just follow him and hear what he has to tell me. Because Kay in this novel is far braver and more courageous than I was at his age. Particularly, the book takes place in the 90s, and one thing that surprises people about Los Angeles when I explain my experiences is like deeply homophobic. I guess everywhere has the potential of being it, even if it, like, places contain multitudes. Like here in New York City, you could be in the Lower East Side and see Trump banners on semi trucks flying through, and it's just like, wow, we're in New York City. It's really strange. But the same thing for Los Angeles. And so this gave me an opportunity to get to know myself through writing, and that's, I think, the most romantic or utopic idea of writing that I could think of. Is, I think, in Eden right now, you're like, Jesus, shut up already. There's one question. Joan Didion, yeah, she's like, I sit down at my desk to discover what I'm gonna write, rather than sitting down to tell the page what I'm gonna write. It's like letting it come. And I feel that this novel was the case for that as well.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Both exploring yourself, but then also expanding that world. Yeah, it feels very queer, it feels very utopic, you're right, to kind of wander off the
I
path.
also didn't mention, so usually when people do these things, like it's a friend that you reach out to or somebody that you know. Nikki and I have never met, and it's or talked before this, and it's really cool. And I told you this when you walked in, I'm so honored that you agreed. Nikki came in from DC for this event, and so like shout out for that. I really mean that. Thank you so
Okay, thank you. I don't know how to borrow from here. Thank you. Okay, yeah, a beautiful beginning. The next thing I wanted to ask, and we're gonna keep talking about queerness, like it's just what it is. The title of the novel, I Will Greet the Sun Again, and Furu, and what she means to so many of us. I will let you talk about what she means to you, and why this title, why the poem that you chose.
So glad you asked that, and there I go again. Like, you know what, we can just switch, because you have the magic touch with the mic. We can go back and forth. Yeah. There's no, yeah. Just don't press any buttons. That's great advice. That's great life advice. I look at her as a very queer person. Even though I think all of her poetry is about heterosexual sex or heterosexual desire, but I mean queer in the sense that she rejected convention and wrote about desire, period, full stop. Like whether it's queer desire or not, or homosexual desire or not, or gay desire or lesbian desire, she wrote about desire, and I find that to be a kind of queerness that I want to emulate myself after, of looking around at what the norms are, and still, I mean, in some way, I think it cost her her life, you know.
and it's just such a, when I read her poetry, that's the first kind of response I have, is why it makes me so emotional, is because she was doing something that was not only radical but dangerous, and we're seeing that, of course, continue today, you know, across the world, people sharing and standing up for what they believe in, and to me, that's a very like James Baldwin and Audre Lorde, these queer ancestors. I think for me, it goes beyond sexuality and more so about how you show up in the world.
I think it's so fascinating how we all just keep coming back to her and her words, and they just remain timeless and inspiring. I use a quote of hers in my poetry. I keep going back to her. Also as somebody who, you know, dealt with mental illness, and like struggled with it, and like hopelessness.
Had her kid, you know, taken from her.
Yeah. And yeah, so why this title? Why I Will Greet the Sun Again? Why that poem?
Well, this, I'm the type of person, I don't know if anybody can relate to this, where if I'm working on a project or book or whatever, I will come up with a lot of titles that I think are very brilliant. And I was like, wow, like I can't wait to share this with my editor. She's gonna have so much to choose from. Or my agent, and it was just like no after no. Not, you know, not, I was just like, what the hell is this? But just like we don't, it's not quite fitting. And then we started, because the poetry plays a role in the narrative, in the story. We, my editor and I both were like going through Farouk's work, and I would pull like lines for title options, which again I thought were amazing. But this title, Prissa landed on it, my editor, and it just sort of captured. I love the I will, you know, it sort of leaves it open-ended, it's hopeful. And I feel like that encapsulates the journey. And in a way, I think Farouk was telling herself that as a mantra of like, I'll get there, even if it's not happening right now.
Yeah, and that's such, I think, an Iranian pathos, like especially now, all the time. But yeah, this need to believe that, you know, there is more coming.
What does Farouk mean to you? I mean, it's funny, while you were reading your poetry, I was thinking about her a lot, especially sort of, she talks about the wind, talk about the mountain, she talks about the sun, you know, so
Yeah,
how
I
about for
mean,
you?
I think like exactly what I was saying, as somebody who, I mean, when I first encountered her in college, and I was just moved at, like, you know, a woman writing this way and the time that she lived in and dealing with what she did. And then the older I got, the more I was like confronting my own struggles with mental health. The more I like saw her poetry as like a guide, like the poetry of somebody who, she has like one poem where she's like, I am like speaking to you from the, like the end of darkness, from like the bottom of the pit, basically. And these poems, and then she has, let us believe in the beginning of the cold season, like putting faith in, you know, the darkest of times. I will greet the sun again, having like holding on to this thing when there is no reason to, there is no hope to. And I think that's what she means to me, and I think that's why people keep coming back to her poetry. Like when I was in Tehran, I mean, her books were everywhere on the street. Yeah, like constantly. And I, like, you know, some of the editions are like, I'm sure they take certain poems out. But like, you know,
It's so encouraging to hear that she.
yeah, no, absolutely. And like I had friends who were helping me read her poetry. Like she continues to be such I don't want to say icon, because but I really think that like that is the reason that we keep coming back to her. And then exactly what you were saying, like the title, I will, is like movement forward, and even the chapter that you were reading, this like this churning and these waves and this like kind of plowing forward into the water. This book really feels so much about desire, and that's how it feels clear to me as well, reading it. Desire for belonging, desire for home, desire to be American enough, desire for like feeling at home in your body, to become older, to become an adult. in so many ways, and that light that you talk about in Farouk's eyes in the passage, and then there's the light in Kay's eyes, and there's this drive. And then the comparison to that you make with Mama in the book to Farouk, and even her hair. Can you talk a little bit about the character of Mama and just the loving way that you create this character and these comparisons, and I guess what she represents in the story? It's fine.
Oh,
You absolutely.
apologies on behalf of the board.
Yeah, I've been lifting weights again, so maybe the mic's like you're too masked for me. Sorry, babe. I don't know. I've been lifting weights again and feeling myself about it. I have to say that. Speaking of Farouk, like, I mean, you know, like all great, you know, role models, sometimes they could be, she definitely loved her cigarettes, and that was something that I had to be like, babe, you keep smoking, I can't keep smoking. So, but Mama is, I wish I could write a whole book about Mama. Maybe I can. And it was really tricky with this because it's told from in the present tense, and it stays true to the age of the narrator. And so he is sharing about Mama and what he knows and what he's receiving about Mama. Mama had an arranged marriage in Iran. Her husband is quite older than she is. Mama's the victim of abuse, as a lot of women, not just Iranian women, but women are. And I, as the writer, felt that and knew that about her, but Kay didn't. And so which fucking sucks, honestly. Like there's so much that I wanted to explore, but I guess that constraint, one could ask like, well, why did you put that constraint? A, I wanted to just tell a story through a young person's POV, but B, I don't think I was mature enough or strong enough to really write about what Mama was dealing with in a way that's compelling, in a way that doesn't just like make you turn into a puddle when you think about your mom and what she's been through. Which there was plenty of that too, but yeah, so you asked me what I have to, well, what to say about her, and that's, I think, I wish there's so much more to her, and even when I talk to some folks who have read the book, she's often the character where they're like, I wish there was more Mama, and I'm like, me too. I wish there was more Mama for her.
But now I didn't.
That's the weights, I've been lifting weights.
Yeah, yeah, I've been lifting weights. No, but I also think that, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and also at the same time that there is that like gap between them, and Kay even, I think, talks, trying not to spoil the book for those who haven't read it, but Kay even talks about that distance, like Kay recognizes that, you know, there are things Mama can't say or isn't able to say, and he wishes that she could, and there's a little bit of reconciling with that space between them at the end of it.
There's also like, it was such a, because this was also an experience I had loosely, but there's a scene where they're in Los Angeles and they go to an amusement park, which, yeah, Mama's like terrified of heights, and as I think most normal people should be. It's very strange that we go on these like roller coasters. I mean, I love roller coasters, and no shame to anybody who does, but and she's having this like really strong reaction to having been duped by Kay and his brother. She was dragged onto the roller coaster, and that's the inciting incident where they're able to talk about what Roman is going through, but it comes in such like so small doses.
Yeah, talking about it without like,
No, you're wrong. Talking about it without like actually talking about it, like kind of talking around it. And there's a lot of that in the book as well. These things that like, because Kay is young, because there's homophobia, because there's chauvinism, because there's language barriers, and like age barriers. There's things that Kay can't quite articulate. And the whole time I was
Reading, oh, come on, you're doing so good.
the whole time I was reading it, I was thinking about, I mean, I'll say it again, like the bravery of writing a queer story from an Iranian perspective, because, at least from my experience and the experience I've heard from other, Swana writers, there's so much that goes unsaid. There's so much that like is sort of taboo to talk about. And I think part of that is like home life, the private life, and also like your interior life in a way, unless it comes out in poetry and it's, you know, comes like out like this or music. But talking about those private things, the like scary, traumatic, things. And we're meant to, I think, I'm speaking very generally and broadly, so please, you know, contradict me if I'm speaking for everyone, but I have felt a lot of like this demand of reverence for the parents and the family, which is often silencing. And then as well, the other part, what was I say? Also a reverence for like protecting our Iranian identities, because I mean, and so the book also goes from the 90s into the new millennium, into post 9/11. And there, I think that a lot of artists, or at least I, sometimes feel this pressure or this need to protect Iranian identity and Iranian representation, because we see so much misrepresentation, so much negative representation. It's like we want to romanticize it and we want to protect it. But this book, you know, it really like, it gets in there, it gets into a lot of things that, you know, are unspoken, are often silenced. It goes into like some of the most intimate moments of Kay's, you know, learning about his own body, about his sexuality. And I would like to hear about that, about like, you know, what did that feel like? Or did it feel like anything? Or was it just like, this is the story that has to be told?
So much there. I don't even know, also to your point of identity and another several writings here, I don't even know what it means to be Iranian. I'm still figuring that out. I think having been born and it just default being told to you that it's a bad thing to be Iranian and something to be ashamed of. I think, you know, of course the revolution, but then also post the hostage crisis, you know, that really kind of sealed the deal. And so for me, yeah, it was this thing that can y'all believe, like, I remember one time in sixth grade, somebody asked me, like, you know, the thing, like, where are you from? You know, it's like, I'm from, you know, American. No, 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 where are you really from? Like, and I was like, oh God, I think my mom's Mexican. And it was like, this is like I was talking to Leslie, who's like full Latina. She's like, you're not fucking Mexican, you know? It's like, shit, you know? So I just like, so outrageous would have been, you know, maybe I should have chosen something a little bit more believable, but I say that, I mean, and I don't mean to be so flippant or lighthearted about it, but yeah, just to your point about, I think this need to embrace. I'm still wondering what I would be even embracing. And I think in the novel, there was a lot of that where Kay is like, okay, we were in Iran and there were these things that we were shown or that I saw, and he's just trying to find his way through it. And I think very much I'm still trying to figure that out too. There's a lot of division amongst us, just like with any part of the world. And I still have, you know, I'm excited to keep exploring that.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, and one more thing I want to say about the emotional part of it. Yeah, it is so raw. And I think even me, sometimes when I was going through it to try to figure out which portion I wanted to read tonight, and I was reading, I was like, you really wrote about that? Wow. Different you back then.
No, I think it's.
I'm like, Angela, kid, you know, it's like, be ashamed of yourself. I just hear like my dad's voice.
No, yeah, a lot of times as an artist too, I'm like thinking about, oh, what if my parents see this? Like, it's, or like my family in Iran sees this, and it's a lot of like my growth as an artist has been like trying to sort of like unravel that, and
One of my
Yeah.
favorite things at the last event that we did, I was talking about, because I was also in conversation with another Iranian portista, Akbar, was brilliant. And I was talking about how like it's such an Iranian thing to like be like, my son published a book, you know, this is amazing, you know, this and that. And then, you know, and my brother was in the audience too, and we were both sort of had this moment where it's like, you should open it. Because I think your sort of feeling about it would be a little different. Like, I mean, I remember even once I was like, I should take it to Iran. I'm like, you want to get fucking put in jail?
yeah, I do hope that some people in Iran do read this, that would be beautiful. No, as you were saying something, oh, something else came to my mind, and then it left.
Cut you off like three
No,
minutes
no,
ago.
no.
Embracing Iranianness, identity, not knowing what it means to be Iranian.
Yeah, again, the like, yeah.
Again, the I will, the like, you know, going towards the movement forward, and the fact that the book also kind of doesn't really end with resolution, it sort of is, it kind of closes a chapter on like Kay's childhood and begins towards like a new sort of movement into young adulthood. But yeah, it leaves it very open. I think the next thing I wanted to talk about was, okay, so then there's also just the fact that this is an Iranian story, that is about a working class Iranian family. And it's also a story about LA. And it's a story about his brothers, and it's a story about, there's a lot of Kay trying to figure out what it means to be American, and this, and sort of contending with this desire to be American. And I think in the same vein, masculinity, what it means to be a man. And he has this like pretty violent depiction of masculinity from his father, and from some of the other people around, like Christian, who like use violence to initiate people into manhood, and you know, like misogyny. And then there's also these like really gentle and kind and generous representations of men. Haji Ava and Hassan and Andres and the man actually Jahan, and Johnny, and that like beautiful friendship between them and the brothers as well. Can you talk about masculinity and maybe, I guess, maybe your own journey with it, but then also, yeah, writing about these different representations, what it means to be a man, especially a queer man, a queer Iranian man.
Yeah, it when you ask that, there's like a feeling of kind of being a fraud, because in a way you know, those toxic examples that we see in Johnny or Christian or even in Bubble in some ways, you know, that's how I spent most of my childhood or adolescence, was, you know, kind of enacting those, and it wasn't until much later on, like embarrassingly later on, I think when I moved out to New York, which there's some symbolism there of like leaving home, but you know, Kay's much younger when he makes a big decision similar to that. I was 26 when I first moved out here, and it all kind of, I had also like after 9/11 legally changed my name, and also so like I started going by my birth name again, Khashayar. It all kind of folded into each other. The queerness, the name, the coming out of the closet to talk about like wanting to be a writer. I feel like that is also like, you know, it takes a version of coming out to announce like this is something that I want to do. And so I think I'm like, now I'm at the phase where I'm reaching back and being like, okay, there are beautiful things about masculinity, such as like lifting weights. And that I'm like starting to enact. in all seriousness, real shit, like that's been really cool of like being back at the gym, be like, you are so queer, it's crazy. And like you can also be that athlete that you were in high school and like enjoy this part of yourself. You know, it's really important to me to integrate all those aspects. And I don't know, I often wonder like if Kay would get to that point, or what it would be like for him, because I mean, the kid goes through like sexual violence, he goes through violence, and he witnesses violence, and yet he's still brave enough to act on his queer desire for Johnny. And so I wonder, there are like some instances where I can see him super drugged out, you know, and like really spiraling, or having similar challenges that I've had, or sort of skipping past that and being his true self.
Um, I was also reading, I just happened upon an essay that was quoting, Solma Sharif and, this quote that she gave in an interview where she said, language is desire enacted. I want to tell you something. And again, I really think that this novel is so queer, not just in its subject, but in this like push and desire, this like fire that's inside this character that is like trying to come out, that is entangled with his queerness, his wanting to become a man, his bouncing between Iranianness, Americanness, and also his Muslim identity. And then this like love of words and this love of writing that he doesn't even really recognize in himself. But he's this observant character who's like constantly watching. And then there's also like these things that they talk about. This was a thing I wanted to bring up before. Whenever Baba tries to like uses like, you know, spanking or violence to insist on his way of things or insist on his view of how a life should be lived, there are these like beautiful phrases you write about, like in the library scene where he says, I will write my own stories one day in the way that I want to. And then there's you know, lines about like the brothers just like figuring out how to make their lives their own, Kay trying to figure out how to make his life his own. And doing that through language. I wanted to know if you could talk about that as well, this relationship with words and writing and recording, or yeah, fiction, exploring, discovering new things.
Language, I said this like the first day of my MFA, and I'll say it's the day I did. Language saved my life, and I really feel that it's been such a cool thing. Getting to know this thing that I felt I was so distant from growing up. So I had these snippets, but you know, in a difficult upbringing, as maybe some of you could relate, things are sort of fragmented or fractured. But I would have, yeah, these instances where in second grade and we're doing a spelling bee, and I'm like sitting there, just completely enraptured by my teacher enunciating certain words. And as a second grader, you don't really make sense of that or meaning of it. You just think it's this mandatory thing, like everybody does spelling bee, blah, 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 I want to get a good grade. It's only looking back, wow, that was a really important moment for me. And so that was my experience with language growing up, like really just these disparate pockets. And then it was reading Furu Farrokhzad, reading different poets, reading James Baldwin and other writers where feels like their life depends on it, on language as well. I've shared this before, but one of my favorite quotes that I think of often, he wrote something about the playwright Lorraine Hansberry, and what he said is that she was ambitious in an impersonal kind of way, and his definition of impersonal ambition is trying to keep the faith. And I feel like for me, language is all about trying to keep the faith in whatever that means for me, and it changes.
No, I think that's beautifully put, and I think if you're right, that's also in a tradition of I think the writers that we've been talking about. I think Furu, like when you ask what does she mean to me, like she's a writer who writes to keep the faith in hopelessness. And you know, James Baldwin, of course, Solma Sharif also had another quote where she was saying like poetry is not just you know, the why, like poetry is describing the world as it is, but the why of poetry is the world that could be. And I really do believe that like this kind of book and bringing this book into the world and having a depiction of a very singular queer Iranian-American experience is so important because I think a lot of people, like we're part of an upcoming generation, I feel like I can see more and more queer Iranian artists and writers being more and more open about their identities and sort of paving a new way forward. And I think that it's, you know, it's becoming part of like a beautiful, I think, tradition now. And like, you know, along with some of our peers. And the other thing I want to ask, okay, this is maybe a little lighter, but the basketball.
I feel like I hate basketball.
Okay. No, like because my dad was still, even though I never really grew up in LA, my dad was obsessed with the Lakers. And so I also grew up watching Shaq and Kobe and like, you know, it doesn't get out of you. But then this like, you know, the way that basketball and this, it's also this drive, it's pursuit, it's like Sean making his own life and then Kay encountering Andres and this like inspiring male figure. Yeah, like what does basketball mean to you? Do you still play basketball or do you just live weights
I played basketball and I talk so much shit about basketball. It's so funny because I'm like, babe, you need to grow up. You're really cool. Like, you're not 16 anymore. But speaking of masculine, I mean, I feel there's so much. Hilton Ellis talks about how masculinity, like especially amongst athletes, like it's all drag. And so there's so much of these athletes just performing masculinity, and I think there's a lot of that on the basketball court as well. And I love performing drag when I go play basketball. It's a identity that I get to slip into and have fun with, and you know, also like try to be like, okay, this is getting actually go out of hand. Like now there's arguments, blah blah blah. But I am if my brother and I too, and we go back and forth about it and who's better than the other. But I love it so much. It's a way to get into the body and be in the moment and also connect with the community. Look more like folks in Bed-Stuy or Crown Heights and yeah, just hooping.
does your brother actually play basketball? And is he still?
Yeah,
Okay.
he does. Yeah. Like last week we played together and we're again then we have like this whole recovery process as if we're on the Lakers. You know, it's like
Yeah, no, I love the line where like, you know, this, they see them win, they see Kobe and Shaq for help, because such a like important moment, in like LA history. And then like,
like we could do that too.
it's beautiful. And then this like kind of vulnerability also from Kay of like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like what does it mean that now we've decided we're gonna be important. We've decided our lives are gonna be something.
Yeah, there's all these like phrases, especially and again, this is part of being American. You just are taking it like be great, live your dream, pursue blah 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 blah. And you talk about this in your poetry. And so I think for the boys too, it's like be a champion. And Kay's like, yeah, we'll be champion. But wait, what does that mean in the context of our lives? Like to be a champion. So it is a great role model, but like I think was also misleading for the boys because they're not going to play again.
Yeah. And then the last question I'll ask before we open it up. You mentioned that you have another project coming up. Can you talk a little bit about it? Or maybe not exactly what it is, but you know, is this also going to be an exploration of queerness? Is it going to be an exploration of like, is it going to be like a new chapter in like young adulthood now that you've sort of written this beautiful buildings roman?
Yeah, I feel like and this wasn't it was not the case of constraints being put on me. I just feel like a boy that's just been like let off timeout. Because now I'm like, wow, I can write from an older perspective. I have so much to say. And that's kind of what's been the case right now is I have so much to say about masculinity and queerness, but from a different side of the spectrum or a different vantage point. This is told through a very young person, and the narrator in this new manuscript is yeah is much older, and it's like there's a lot to be said. Thank you, Nikki.
Put your hands together.
This is still worth.
Hopefully, I think we're good to go, I think here. Questions for these two brilliant writers, anybody? All right.
I've been trying to like form the actual question in my head the whole time. So I'm also Iranian and I'm queer. And I think
Welcome, thank you for being here.
growing up for both of you and being an artist, can you talk a little bit about what it's like to feel like you're the only one that's the way you are in like a friend group or like a family setting, like when you're at a family meeting? Like, I think even if I had the most close and like dear friendships with people, there was always, not anymore now, but back then there was always that barrier. And I'm wondering if you guys also had that, and if you did or didn't, talk about how that manifests for you. If that makes sense.
I do have one, do you have one?
No, you go.
Yeah. I remember feeling a lot of loneliness growing up, and not necessarily because I understood like that I was queer and that I was different, and but yeah, just this feeling, and I have an aunt who is openly out as well, and but parents like kept it secret from me for a long time. So, but even when I didn't know like what a lesbian was, or like what you know, that my aunt loved other women, I like felt this connection to her and this like knowing, and so that there were these like moments as well. And then but then I feel like also Kay in the story also has these feelings of like being the only one, being kind of set apart, and being able to watch everybody because of that, but also just kind of knowing and holding all these secrets. And so I think there's also the thing about youth where you don't have as much choice. You don't really get to choose, like you're being shuttled around. I mean, in this case, there was like a very big traumatic moment with Kay where, you know, the bullet takes them to Iran, and you don't get to have as much of a choice of like who you live with, where you're going, what your path is, where you go to school. At least for, I think, the majority of us. And I felt that a lot. I felt like I very consistently had this feeling of like, I am not supposed to be here, like I'm in the wrong place. And I think like getting older, it's been very difficult because I think that you have to make decisions about like what your life is going to be. I mean, that's what I was really moved by in the book, these lines of like, you know, what it takes to make my life my own, what it takes to build the life that I want. And like that is like a big part of like becoming an adult. And part of that means like losing people. Part of that means like transformation, and that requires grief. finding new people means saying goodbye to other people. And when you're Iranian, at least for me, when you're Iranian and you have these like intense family ties and this intense like desire to be tied to home and tied to your culture, it's very difficult to make those decisions, I think, because these are people that you love, but also you have to find the ways to like make your life your own and honor yourself at the same time.
Thank you for that. Still working, yeah. Thank you for that, Nikki. I will add to that in saying, it's not an original thought. I heard, I think the writers Ocean Vuong and Brian Washington talk about this, also two queer writers, and they talked about how they're also a brilliant question. Thank you for it. They talked about that loneliness and how it was the awareness of their queerness early on that actually led them to the lives that they get to have now. And you brought up this kind of watching, observing, and I do think that is not to dismiss the alienation that comes from it, but to Nikki's point, when you see at the Mehmoudi or at the dinner table, there isn't possibility for connection in a really real and authentic way. It becomes this sort of guidepost for finding other queers and like making that family. I have a mentor that calls it the lavender mafia. So yeah, you find your lavender mafia.
And also like, I think there's so many queer Iranians in New York, especially, which is beautiful, and understand, like, really, I want to emphasize that I think this book is important because of how it like is like opening up space for this kind of story, and the fact that like queer Iranians have existed forever, queer, Browns and Arabs and Swans, have like been around forever. Like the queerness is such a big part of our tradition, and so there's a reclamation in there that I think we can also be very proud of and excited about, and like really release in each other.
Okay. Hi, thank you for chatting. Surprise, I'm also queer and Iranian. My question, so it was more directed at Khashayar about the transition from nonfiction to fiction. I'm guessing this is a work of autofiction, and autofiction usually like lies between the two. I'm just wondering what your relationship to the genre is. I mean, my observation is that there's been a lot of it. It's been like on the rise in the general contemporary literature. But I think it like there's pros and cons, and some of it can alienate the truth, some of it can like clarify the truth even more. So yeah, I just want to know what your thoughts are on the genre.
Such an amazing question, an important question. There's this novel called So Long, See You Tomorrow by William Maxwell, and I bring it up because he had been in the literary world for a very long time, but I think he published that book either in his late 70s or early 80s, and if I'm remembering correctly, it's like based off this childhood experience he had, and the experience he had been holding on to this shame for all of his life, and the incident was like one of his school friends had gone through this really traumatic incident with his father, and the narrator, when he saw this boy at school, didn't wave to him. And this whole book is sort of built around that incident. And I bring that up because in some ways you sort of have to decide, to your point, what tells the truth more. Like when I think of that example, I'm like, wow, if he wanted to fictionalize it, or because it's autofiction, he could have talked about how like he spat on the boy or something, but he really focused on that small gesture, but is like informed so much of the book. And then for me, with this book, as Nikki mentioned, the characters were taken to Iran, and it's something that I experienced when I was young. But in my life, my father came back with us, and it was really cool or really important to give and grant Kay the freedom of Bubba staying in Iran when the boys came back to the States, because that changed the trajectory of his upbringing. So that's an instance where, to me, fictionalizing it really helps because it didn't have the presence of Bubba in the book, the second half of the book. Hope that answers your question. Any more questions?
So yes, I do think I think my favorite character in the book is Paulette, and I was wondering if she's like based on an actual member of your, like an actual aunt in your family, and like how important it was to have that character written in your book.
I think she's my favorite. She's a gangster. She's a gangster. She like, yeah, smuggles the boys out. She's like, she tries to tell Kay about her queerness, is in Iran, so isn't able to. I needed her. I needed there to be a hero in the story. And it was just so much of the book is dominated by boyhood and masculinity, and to have this sort of matriarch figure was really, really cool. And I think she's a composite of several of the women, like my grandmother and my aunt and my mom, and Farouk. I thought a lot about Farag Zad when I was writing Khaba's character. Farag Zad made this documentary in this leprosy colony in northern Iran, I want to say, or just in the outskirts of Iran, where they were put in this just alienated situation. And she went back and adopted one of the boys from there. And that seems like a gesture that Khaled would do, like literally rescue these boys from their fathers. So thank you for pointing that out. Just one question. What's your favorite Iranian restaurant? On purpose.
I'm sure.
I do feel a lot. I don't know. I guess I don't really go to any, sorry. I like really, I guess I'll just say like, as opposed to a restaurant, I really just love to go to the Iranian markets, in DC, because, I mean, they're not even like in DC. They're like on the outskirts. You have to get a car, you have to drive out to Maryland, you have to drive out to Virginia. But those are my favorite places to go and get like, all the good stuff. All the lava shack and the like seeds and stuff and oh my God, I was actually just thinking about this recently. Like, we lived in, I grew up in Northern Virginia where there's a lot of Iranians, and we lived close to this. I think it was called like Yazd Market or like Yazdi Market or something. But there was an older man who worked at the bakery section who was like Bangladeshi. He would always, because me and my sister were young, he'd always give us like a free pastry, like a free roulette or something. So that's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I've been throwing down in the kitchen like when I'm not lifting weights. And love making gorma sabzi, love making kuku sabzi, kashka badanjan. Those are my favorites right now. Two in New York and Brooklyn, or in New York City, two very different restaurants. So there's Nasrin's Kitchen in Midtown. That's great. When you walk in, it feels like you are in Isfahan. And it's just, yeah, it feels like step walking into home, big portions, kind of what you would expect a home cooked meal to be. And then there's Sofra, which is also really, really great. The Chef Nassim has her own sort of twist on things and adds her own touch, and it's so elegant and delicious, and it's also just a beautiful space. Both spaces are so beautiful. I think that's so much of Iranian food is you go for the experience, and both those places offer that. Thanks everybody. Thanks for being here.